My name is Cary Nelson, and I'm going to give a talk about the 10 worst things about the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, also known as BDS. I should begin by saying that I'm a strong believer that only a two-state solution, 2 states for 2 peoples, offers a route to justice for both Israelis and Palestinians, and a means for these 2 peoples to control their own political destinies and live side by side in peace. The first thing I ask of any political proposal, therefore, is whether it supports that goal and what precise practical steps it offers to take us there. In talking with audiences, I look for rational arguments. I don't begin by offering an emotional appeal on behalf of either side. That practice, either dramatizing how small a country Israel is, how vulnerable its citizens on its borders are, how narrow the country's waist is, how anti-Semitic Israel's neighbors are, how demoralizing and terrifying the suicide bombings were, or testifying passionately to how traumatic the Nakba was, how wretched the lives of Palestinians in the refugee camps often are, how frustrating it is for them to face constant police surveillance, how galling the checkpoints can be when the flow of people is stalled, how counterproductive IDF policies like the demolition of individual homes are, how disturbing images of dead children are. I take all of this and more as a given. But if the standard entry fee for a campus discussion of the Arab-Israeli conflict is to work up the audience's sense of anger and injustice for either people, well, then I'm going to disappoint you. I believe empathy for both peoples is critical to any viable solution to the conflict. But political and emotional agitation amounts to a competition over victimhood. It's not a useful contribution to the debate. I prefer cold reason directed toward achieving a just peace, a peace in which both people must compromise. Pro and con campus debates about BDS or the Arab-Israeli conflict often amount to competing efforts to win people over exclusively to one side or the other with emotional appeals. It amounts to war by other means. It only serves to make BDS supporters here and abroad feel good about themselves. It enhances their self-image by convincing them they have signed on to a selfless cause. So, given all this, does BDS promote or undermine the peace process? I'm going to identify 10 key problems with the movement's arguments and agenda. 1. BDS demonizes, antagonizes, and delegitimates one of the 2 parties who have to negotiate a solution to the conflict by working together, and it uncritically idealizes the other. BDS consistently describes the Palestinians as an oppressed people dominated by a ruthless and inhumane military power. Israeli fears of violence and responsibilities for self-defense are dismissed as disqualified by the asymmetrical power relations that define the confrontation. In a peculiar way, this almost defines Palestinians as people without agency. They're simply victims. Yet whether from the vantage point of the 2 intifadas, the rocket fire from Gaza, or the active role the Palestinians played at the Oslo and Camp David negotiations, they obviously have considerable agency. Their increasing success at shaping world political opinion also shows the symbolic and political authority that Palestinians wield. Meanwhile, by castigating Israel and treating it as a morally bankrupt, rogue nation, BDS antagonizes and alienates Israelis, puts their backs against the wall, and actually reduces Israel's reason to trust the negotiation process. The drive to isolate and delegitimate Israel is built into academic, cultural, and economic boycott proposals alike. Indeed, the only real danger from targeted economic boycotts, like those of West Bank companies, is to the Palestinians who rely on jobs with those very companies to support their families. BDS also ignores the offers some, not all, Israeli governments made to return the overwhelming majority of the West Bank to a Palestinian state, and it either ignores Palestinian violence or simply assumes it's a reasonable response to oppression. There remains no satisfactory answer to the most obvious challenge to BDS, that Israel is hardly among the most serious human rights violators either on earth or in the Middle East. The Jews have an ancient and irrevocable bond with the land of Israel. Judaism is a religion founded and created in a place, and it retains that connection. I also believe the world owed the Jews a revived homeland in the wake of the Holocaust. Half of Israel's population descends from Jews who fled Arab countries in 1948. They're hardly European colonialists. The Palestinians also have historical connections with the land, but they're not an indigenous people comparable to American Indians or Australian Aborigines. That fiction is designed to delegitimize the Jewish bond with Eretz Yisrael. Both people have rights, aspirations, and valid territorial claims. The two competing and irreconcilable narratives about Arab and Israeli history both have a core of truth. 2. BDS falsely claims to target institutions, not individuals. This is the core deception in almost every BDS resolution, past or present. The BDS movement is the Western action arm of PACB, the Palestinian Campaign for the Academic and Cultural Boycott of Israel. In 2014, PACB and BDS issued more detailed academic boycott guidelines that make their intentions much more explicit. BDS now makes it very clear how aggressively its guidelines target individuals. American students and faculty, by and large, don't want to feel that they're signing on to a movement that boycotts individual people. In what amounts to a brainwashing strategy, a single BDS resolution typically includes both the pious assertion that it doesn't target individuals and then a list of ways individuals will be targeted. Consider the following piece of Orwellian doublespeak from the 2014 guidelines. While an individual's academic freedom should be fully and consistently respected in the context of academic boycotts, an individual academic, Israeli or otherwise, can't be exempt from being subject to common sense boycotts. BDS demands that all academic and economic projects with all Israeli academic institutions should come to an end. This demand eviscerates the essential freedom that faculty and students have long had to make their own decisions about what collaborative projects to undertake. It also does harm to those Palestinians engaged in collaborative projects with Israeli faculty and institutions. BDS urges all faculty and students not to publish in Israeli journals. It also insists that we refuse to reprint articles first published in such places, thus initiating an extraordinary blacklisting of publications and their authors. This is a fundamental assault on academic freedom and the free exchange of ideas that is its core principle. BDS urges faculty not to write recommendations for students hoping to pursue studies in Israel, once again sabotaging standard faculty rights and harming the students involved. Students' programs, HILES at Israeli universities are characterized as schemes that should be boycotted and closed down. Jewish students, of course, are the main target of efforts to close down study abroad programs in Israel and often of joint American-Israeli degree programs. They are also key recipients of what would now be targeted scholarships or fellowships from pro-Israeli organizations. BDS guidelines prohibit visits to Israeli universities if they include any links with the institution visited. Violators, once again, could be subject to blacklisting. In a blatantly discriminatory gesture, the guidelines advise that if conducting research at Israeli facilities, such as archives, doesn't entail official affiliation with those facilities, as in the form of a visiting position, then the activity is not subject to boycott. Israeli faculty, they generously advise, should not be automatically boycotted. They should simply be treated like all other potential, quote, offenders. BDS says its guidelines establish a picket line barring all the activities it lists, including visits to Palestinian universities by faculty who have earlier visited Israeli universities and therefore, quote, contribute to the false perception of symmetry. Once again, the academic freedom of individuals is curtailed, undermining the potential for interchanges promoting peaceful resolution of the conflict. Meanwhile, the BDS endorsement of common sense boycotts strengthens what's already guaranteed, that academic, cultural, and economic boycotts will be inconsistently implemented and that malicious individual boycott initiatives will proliferate. A series of controversies over whether Israeli faculty members should be allowed to attend conferences in the United States has produced several absurd policies. The American philosopher Judith Butler argues that Israeli faculty should be permitted to attend U.S. events so long as they pay their way themselves instead of having their universities covering their travel costs. Although academic freedom gives faculty the right to seek research support, Butler nonetheless says her, quote, let them eat cake proposal preserves academic freedom. 3. BDS's academic boycott proposals would limit contacts with critics of Israeli policy. It's no secret that among the more vocal critics of Israeli government policy are the country's faculty members. An academic boycott that bars visits to Israeli universities or effectively limits travel abroad by Israeli faculty would curtail dialogue with the very people with whom BDS would logically want more, not less, free interchange. 4. BDS undermines academic freedom. Academic freedom is based on the free expression and exchange of ideas. It assures that faculty have the right to do the research they choose and establish the personal and institutional relationships they wish. It guarantees students the right to hold the opinions they choose and to select from among the intellectual and institutional opportunities available to them. All these rights are attacked by BDS. 5. BDS misrepresents its goal. The most contentious debate in the Arab-Israeli conflict is over whether the goal should be separate Israeli and Palestinian states or one collective state stretching all the way from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean. A one-state solution would create a nation with an Arab majority. It would either bring an end to Israel as a Jewish state, forcing the Jews to flee, or necessitate permanent second-class state for the Palestinians. The one-state solution is unworkable. The BDS website proclaims that it takes no position on the two states, one state debate. But all its major spokespeople say the Jewish state has no right to exist. BDS advocates like Omar Barghouti, Judith Butler, David Lloyd, and Stephen Salaita want not only to delegitimate Israel, but also to eliminate it. Although there's no evidence Jews and Arabs actually want to live together. Since the overwhelming majority of Israelis want a state that is both Jewish and democratic, the bias BDS leaders display thus denies any right to political self-determination for the 6 million Jews who lived there. Only the Palestinians would achieve political self-determination. Oddly, although many BDS advocates believe the nation-state is itself an outdated concept, they insist the Palestinians deserve one. Meanwhile, we must understand that the effort actually to eliminate the Jewish state is a fundamentally anti-Semitic project. even if many of its advocates do not understand that. 6. BDS misrepresents its conditions for a resolution of the conflict. No requirement imposed on Arab-Israeli negotiations more surely guarantees the end of Israel as we know it than the demand that those Arabs who fled, voluntarily left, or were forced out of their homes in Israel during the 1948 war be allowed to return. About 700,000 Jews fled Arab countries when Israel was founded, abandoning their homes and possessions, and about an equal number of Arabs fled Israel. It's likely that fewer than 50,000 survive, but Arab descendants of those who left now number in the millions. Palestinians insist that all of those millions have a right to return to Israel, a requirement the Jews have long recognized is code for the destruction of the Jewish state. BDS, once again, takes no official position on the matter, but once again, all of its leaders firmly endorse the right of return and consider it an absolute condition for an agreement ending the conflict. Like many others, I endorse compensation for families who lost their homes, but I do not endorse a right for people to return to a land where they never lived. 7. BDS demands an end to all efforts to build mutual empathy and understanding between Israelis and Palestinians. Its 2014 guidelines condemn events, projects, or publications that are designed to bring together Palestinians, Arabs, and Israelis so they can present their respective views or to work toward reconciliation if they are based on the false premise of sympathy, parity between the oppressors and the oppressed. But such efforts typically seek balanced Palestinian and Israeli participation and often build on mutual sympathy and shared human interests. Imposing a confrontational agenda on them undercuts some of the most promising efforts at dialogue. BDS insists that such projects be based on, quote, co-resistance rather than coexistence. The idea is not simply to resist Israeli policies, but rather to oppose the existence of the Jewish state. BDS promotes a simple dichotomy. Israel is pervasively unjust. Justice resides only with the Palestinian side of the Arab-Israeli conflict. The organization now rejects all efforts at building respect and encouraging mutual empathy if they are structured to treat Jews and Arabs as equal partners. Thus, BDS rejects rational discussion and interchanges between the two peoples. Ongoing projects designed to encourage mutual understanding begin with young children. They're designed to help Palestinians and Israelis understand each other's cultures and learn to live together. But then that is not the goal of the BDS movement. 8. BDS offers no specific steps toward a resolution of the conflict. Other than its efforts to demonize and isolate Israel, BDS offers no program and no agenda. A meaningful political solution to the conflict has to offer a route to a settlement. BDS offers only antagonism and opposition. 9. BDS falsely claims to imagine a nonviolent route to ending the conflict. Since it identifies no specific actions for the two parties to take, BDS can masquerade as a nonviolent movement. But there is no nonviolent way to achieve its goal of eliminating the Jewish state. Israelis have fought to preserve their country and will do so again if necessary. Recognizing this risk, BDS spokesperson Judith Butler imagines that Jews will voluntarily give up their country because they have so long been a diasporic people, a people persecuted and cast out of so many countries over centuries, that they will willingly embrace that fate and abandon their homeland. This irresponsible fantasy is the best that BDS can offer by way of a nonviolent solution to the conflict. 10. BDS actually offers nothing to the Palestinian people it claims to champion. Perhaps the most cruel and ironic feature of the BDS movement is that it actually offers nothing realistic and tangible to the Palestinian people. The movement is really about capturing the hearts and minds of Europeans and Americans, not about helping the Palestinian people. Its message of hate is a route to war, not peace. In conclusion, then, the situation on the West Bank is intolerable for both Palestinians and Israelis. It denies Palestinians true citizenship, and it corrodes Israeli democracy. But demonizing either side will not help the cause of peace. BDS promotes antagonism. We should instead encourage fair and realistic solutions to the Arab-Israeli conflict. Thank you.